me, that was the end. That was the end. Thereafter, I never described myself anymore. I want to come now to the whole phenomenon of false allegations and prosecutions and so on. And this again has been a great distress and a great set of problems within the system itself. And the practices were developed by certain feminist lawyers. And it seemed to be to make these accusations in the body of civil proceedings. And as you know, there's a difference between civil proceedings and criminal proceedings. The standard is much higher and heftier in criminal ones. But this became so rampant that and I actually recorded on the floor of the House, of the Senate, 52 instances of men who were falsely accused of abusing their own children. And the cases that I put were proven, the accusations were proven to be false, and the judges were quite tough and hard in their description. So I only put cases before the House, 52, I just recorded them, one after the other, and quoted them because I figure another soldier will come along some point in time and just pick up that work. But I want to give you, to read to you from the mind of some of the judges to see what they were saying at the time. And one of them makes the following statement. It was a case where a husband and wife, she had accused him of hitting her. Turns out he was nowhere near her at the time the event was supposed to have happened. But this is what the judge says, and I'll read that to you. Paragraph 19, in acquitting, it was a criminal proceeding, so in acquitting the husband, he made the following statement, the judge made the following statement about the wife, quote, "I find the evidence of the complainant and her mother to be contradictory, confusing, contrary, conflicting, irreconcilable, and quite frankly false." He also continued and expressed an opinion, it's the only one I've been able to find for years, about zero tolerance policy. And he said the following, "I want to make two further comments, because one is curious as to how a man could be falsely accused in these circumstances, right up to and including a trial. The reasons are quite clear to me and disturbing. First, the police apparently have a policy of zero tolerance in domestic assault cases. Any zero tolerance policy is dangerous. It is especially dangerous when it is not properly applied." So that was where the false accusation is as between two spouses, by a wife as against a husband. But I can tell you, in the cases of children, if you want to see men reduced to pulp, is to watch a man who will talk to you about him being accused of sexually abusing his little children. And there's something in the hearts of most men and fathers that find that so soul-destroying, not only repugnant, but soul-destroying that they could be accused of it. But I remember one time Roger and I had a particular guy who actually said to him, "Accuse me of murder, but don't accuse me of hurting my child," like this. So I just want to tell you, and any day of the week we had 20 of these cases coming to our attention. But there's a few judges, more than a few actually, who were taking notice, and I want to take note of another particular judge in a case, and I'm looking for the exact words, where he quotes, "There are far too many prosecutors declining to make the hard decision." This is Justice Saunderson. And there are far too many prosecutors declining to make the hard decisions, lest they offend some interest group or incur the displeasure of their superiors, who themselves are subjected to pressure from the same groups. The result can be made to work hardship in individual cases. He's going to continue. He talks about the wife because he says the wife herself testified that she was drunk and in an out-of-control rampage against because she was upset by something the husband's ex-wife had said to her. So the judge continued, and he criticized the Crown for not charging her for her assaults. It's very interesting, saying it created a double standard. And his exact words are here, quote, "The mere fact of this prosecution sends a very clear message. A woman in a relationship with a man can provoke him, degrade him, strike him, and throw objects at him with impunity. But if he offers the least physical response, he will be charged with assault." So having said it, I just threw this out for you. I'm coming to my last subject matter now, and the whole business of the best interests of the child. Because we saw in this period of time, the last many years, where men were treated as observers in their children's lives. And there's one particular judge who actually, a female judge who actually said that in a case. They're observers. The non-custodial parents are observers in their children's lives, which of course is something we reject. The power of governments and the state in respect of children and custody is infinite power, and it is never time-dated. And I want to explain to you a little bit for those who are interested. I searched for about 2 years trying to find the origin of the term, the best interests of the child. And I found it. And it was introduced into Canada's divorce law in Roger, you'll be interested in this, in 1984, Minister McGuigan's changes. That government, that bill never saw the light of day because it died on the order paper as Liberals were defeated. Mr. Trudeau's people were defeated in the general election in September 1984. But I remember that bill very well. And the minister's intention at the time was that by putting that phrase into the bill in respect of custody and access, because his policy was that children of divorce should have maximum access to other siblings, to both parents, to grandparents. And you find this in all of his policy papers, which were distributed across the country in conferences that he summoned of people in the field, and I was one of them at one point. And very clearly, he had been a law professor, so he was a lawyer's lawyer. And he sincerely believed that that term would, on the ground, would transform itself into shared parenting. And that would have happened if the ground didn't change suddenly. And let me just come back to that term, where that term comes from. That term comes out of those great powers of the king. The American Constitution Americans no longer appreciate the sense of, excuse me, the king in the Constitution, that perpetual sovereign ever present in the Constitution. But in Canada, it is still alive in our Constitution. And these are the powers of the king. And in England, the Lord Chancellor was the most powerful man after the king. He was so powerful he could even cancel a king's letters patent. And the term, the business of child welfare, develops out of the king's protection of children that was owed to the knights and all of those individuals who fought for him. That's where you got terms like wards. If you remember when you were children, there's a childhood thing called Robin Hood. You remember Maid Marian was the ward of the king. So if the kings had knights who left orphaned children, infants, and it was a very sophisticated and complete system, that he owed that child protection and the lands of that child protection, and that when that child became of age, all those properties were expected to be delivered to that child, who hopefully would fight for the next king. And at one point, they developed their own separate courts of wards and liveries to do that. But as time went by, the Lord Chancellor's Court took over those matters. And even to this day, you call the law of equity. All that, the Lord Chancellor's Courts dealt with what they call the law of equity, which is the law that grants justice, not just law. The common law courts grant justice according to the law. The courts of equity grant justice which might have been neglected in the administration of the law. It's a very, very interesting system. So in Canada, the common law courts and the equity courts merged in 1881. So now every superior court judge of Canada has that inherent power to protect children, and the doctrine was called the parens patriae. And this is why something like custody is never final. So they can award custody. If something goes wrong, they can change that custody. But the protection over a child is eternal. And it's an enormous power. And, well, that's another story for another day. But somehow or the other, the interests of the child and the interests of the child's mother has got confused in the last many years. So I wanted to say to you that that term, best interests of the child, was intended to be a ground for greater sharing in the relationship and a greater sharing in children, because 1984 was a time when, all this nonsense was coming to an end, and men were picking up children, taking them for walks, and it's a beautiful thing. I'm a bicycle rider on Saturday mornings, and I'm not a good bicycle rider. I have a bad back, but I still do it. And you'll watch these young families, mom and dad, and 2 or 3 little children on bicycles, and it's a beautiful delight to watch. And they don't stop to debate who should stop and change the little one's diaper. Somebody just does it. And it's a wonderful thing to watch, and that's how couples should relate, and this is how most couples do relate. But in any event, so that is the origin of the term, the best interest of the child. And I think it's a worthy term. I think it's a worthy concept. It's an ancient concept that can be defended by hundreds of years now of jurisprudence. And I would suggest that we would uphold it and defend it and continue to challenge the orthodoxy in the name of the best interest in the child. Now, I hope I've left a few minutes for questions, and I hope that we have a few questions, but that in a quick summary is a statement on the state of the law and the state of society in respect, and a lot of this other stuff about men is just purely imaginary.